All right, welcome to week number 4 for plant biology. We're going to move out of week 3 where we're talking about organisms and cells in general, and we're going to start moving specifically into discussing plants. So this is plant biology. I'm sure you're going to be happy to move from the general to the more specific. That being said, as we are going to move to the more specific plant discussions, you'll probably notice a change in the writing in the textbook. So the reading thus far has been in a book called Concepts of Biology, and we're going to be switching from Concepts of Biology for the next couple of chapters anyways to just plain old biology. And so the level of writing is going to be a little different, but I think it should be understandable, but I think we should cover a little more specific things in this text rather than we'd see in the concepts. You'll probably notice a change in the technicality of the writing, but it should still be accessible and understandable. So just be aware when you're doing the reading, you'll probably notice a difference. We are going to be sort of jumping in the midway point with biology, and for this week we're going to be looking at chapter 30. So chapter 30 is the beginning of their discussion on plants, and so that's where we're going to pick up with what they have to write. We can afford to be a little more non-linear because we are online that way. Today, or this week rather, we're going to be looking at specifically parts of plants' anatomy. We're going to look at general organ systems, and then we're going to cover shoots and roots. There's certainly more, and we're going to cover that later, but shoots and roots is primarily going to keep us busy for this week. Plants have organ systems, not unlike animal organ systems. They're collections of tissues that are performing specific functions. And that similarity is very much the same for all multicellular organisms. Now, to be sure, plant organ systems are very different than our own. Plants don't have kidneys or livers, and we don't have branches or leaves, but we still do have organ systems. With plants, these organ systems are divided into two main groups. We have the shoots and we have the roots. The shoots consist mainly of leaves and stems. These are vegetative structures, so they are just growing, and they're there to provide support and photosynthetic points for the plant. Also among the shoot system are fruits and flowers. These are reproductive structures. These structures are on the plant specifically to move genetic material from one generation to the next. Regardless, they're still part of the shoot system, and generally speaking, they are above ground. Conversely to the shoots, we have the root system, and as you're probably aware, most of the time roots are under the ground. Roots are there to provide support for the plant, to absorb water and other nutrients for the plant, and again, usually they're below ground. But it's also true to say that there are exceptions to both. There are underground shoots and there are above ground roots. So it's not clear cut in that way, but generally speaking, shoots are above ground, roots are below. All right, we do have to have a brief talk about plant tissues. So plants do have tissues. Main types of tissues that they have are meristematic tissue. Meristematic tissue is really important for plants. This is where plants do their growing. So anytime a plant grows, it's at a meristem. They have dermal tissue, or a covering. They have vascular tissue. Plants move a lot of water through their bodies, and they need an effective way to do that. And tubes, just like your veins and arteries are tubes, plants have tubes as well, and that's vascular tissue. Structurally, very different than ours, but functionally very the same. It's just tubes that move liquids. Plants also have ground tissue and simpler, complex secondary tissues as well. So as you're reading, go through those and understand the differences and similarities between those different types of tissues. All right, let's start talking about stems. Stems, again, are part of the shoot system, and there's some basic types of cells that we're going to talk about when we talk about stem anatomy. We have parenchyma cells, collenchyma cells, and sclerenchyma cells. All three of those words are obnoxiously close in pronunciation, but they are definitely different. So parenchyma cells usually are providing sort of metabolic functions for plants. So they're doing the sort of the biochemistry that plants need to survive. Collenchyma cells are structural cells that are usually functioning when they're alive, and sclerenchyma cells are structural cells that are usually functioning when they're dead. Not all of plants are alive at the same time. They definitely accumulate dead material as part of their growth and development. And if it's still functional and supportive, those are what we would call sclerenchyma cells. All right. Stems usually do consist of dermal tissue. So again, dermis is on the outside, and these are coverings. On the leaves, rather, we have specific dermal tissue that are called guard cells. Now, guard cells, there we go, are made up of two cells. Try to not get my face in there. That form openings around what are called stomata, and they sort of change their shape and open and close these holes as the plant's need for air changes, and also as plants try to limit their water loss through evapotranspiration. So these guard cells are on the leaves, and they're important for keeping these pores in the leaves open or closed depending on what the metabolic needs of the plants are. Apparently there's a tour walking behind you. Oh, well, welcome to NICC, folks. Vascular tissue. Yep. Plants, again, do have vascular tissue, and it's made up of these tubes that are there to move water up or down the plant. Plants need to move water up from their roots to the leaves, but they also need to be able to move liquids back down to bring the nutrients that the leaves are producing and bring those sugars back down to the roots to supply the entire plant with energy. We're also going to look at growth. So growth in these stems takes place in sort of a couple of different sorts of dimensions. We have primary growth, which is growth in length, and then secondary growth, which is growth of the girth, or the width of the tree, well, plant. Usually when we're talking about secondary growth, we're talking about sort of how wide a tree gets as it gets older and older. So that would be secondary growth. And stems definitely have plenty of modifications. We have what are called rhizomes, which are stems that grow underground. We have stolons, which are stems that grow over the ground. We have tubers, which are modified stems that hold starch. You guys are familiar with tubers, right? You guys did that potato experiment, or you're at least familiar with potatoes or sweet potatoes or something like that, and those are modified stems for energy storage. Also, bulbs are modified stems. Roots. The root system is connected to the shoot system in this track of the plant, but usually the roots are underground again. Root systems usually come in one of two main types. We have what are called taproots. You're probably most familiar with taproots in vegetables like carrots. So you have this very, sort of typical sort of V-shaped root that grows deep into the ground with not a lot of side rooting coming off. Other roots grow in this fibrous system where you have the roots spread out underground with lots and lots of little roots that find water and nutrients that way. So those the two main types would be tap roots and fibrous roots. The reality is many plants have a combination of the two. They'll often have a taproot component, but often they'll have a fibrous root component as well. You should also understand the way that roots grow, and then also any root modifications that are discussed as well. Some roots don't actually grow into the ground. Some roots are called aerial roots, and they collect water from the air. Some tap roots are more specialized than others. Some roots are what are called prop roots, and they'll grow above ground but provide support out to the ground higher up than at the ground surface. Some roots grow up and out. If you're a tree in a wetland situation, you can grow what are called pneumatophores, and they're often look like knees coming up out of off the surface of the water or the soil, and those are modified roots. All right, so that's what we're going to be covering this week, is primarily shoots and roots, modifications of them, interesting things about them, how they function for plants, and other different tissue types. So the beginning of chapter 30 should keep you guys busy for this week. Check on Brightspace for discussion and assignments, and I hope you have a great week. Thank you.